Fire engineering podcasts are sponsored by MSA. Firefighters want to be connected to each other, to dispatch, and to their commanders. MSA has created Lunar, a wireless, handheld device that includes thermal imaging, firefighter ranging, motion alarm, and cloud technology with GPS. It's part of the new connected firefighter platform from MSA. Learn more at msafire.com.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fire Engineering Talk Radio and tonight's installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Tom Merrill here, and so glad to have you listening in. Tonight's a live episode. The last couple I've done, I've pre-recorded, so tonight is a live episode. If you'd like to call in, I encourage you to do so. And as a matter of fact, just to let you all know, this is the last live episode that I'll be doing in this series. After the first of the year, the decision was made to begin to pre-record all the episodes. So things are going to change just slightly, but that's really how most podcasts are today anyway, and it's just allows us to have a lot more flexibility. Unfortunately, we don't have people call in anymore, but as you know, most people are listening later on anyway when they're working out or doing work around the house or sitting in the firehouse, so I don't think that's going to be too big of a deal. But my last live episode, if anybody wants to call in, I encourage you to please do so. And again, a reminder that call-in number is 760-454-8852. So thanks again for listening in tonight. And I pledge to you I will always continue and work very hard to line up great guests and pursue topics that are very important, very relevant to our great volunteer fire service. And I encourage you, if you have ideas, topics, or guests that you would like me to invite onto the show or talk about, please send me your ideas, your recommendations. I'm easy to get a hold of. I encourage you to like my Facebook page, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. And as I've said the last couple months, I'm inching closer to 10,000 likes. I really, really want to get to 10,000 likes. It would mean a great deal to me. So if you haven't as of yet, please give the Facebook page a like, and that's the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Or send me an email at tamerrill63@aol.com. And I promise I will get back to you, and I will listen to what you have to say and share your stories of good things going on in your firehouse or any challenges you're having. A lot of people have reached out to me, heard some pretty distressing stories, but I've also heard some great stories as well regarding our great volunteer fire service. So feel free to give a shout out to me to talk and give me your ideas and suggestions, as well as share stories of what's going on in your neck of the woods. And speaking of your neck of the woods, in my neck of the woods, snow is coming down. My phone is starting to alert me that we're going to be getting some snow here the next few days through Thursday, they're telling me, which is not unusual for us. It actually is in line with the Christmas season. Matter of fact, when I'm done recording the show tonight, I'm under strict orders by the real chief of the household and to get the Christmas lights put up on the Christmas tree tonight. So those are my marching orders for tonight, and it's kind of cool doing it as the snow is falling. It just adds to the whole festive atmosphere, and I want to wish all of you a very happy and healthy and safe holiday season. So thanks for listening in. Thanks to Fire Engineering and Chief Bobby Halton for supporting these great podcasts. Thanks to our show sponsor, MSA. Without any of these people, none of this would be possible. We would not be able to bring you these podcasts. So I thank them very, very much. And I'm sure you recognize Chief Halton's voice there on the MSA advertisement leading up to the show. So, and speaking of Chief Halton, he wants me to make sure I invite you, and I personally want to invite you as well, to FDIC next year. It's not too early to be thinking about the greatest fire show in the world. It's the Fire Department Instructors Conference in Indianapolis, and it'll be in April 20th to the 25th. So the time is now to reserve your room, pick your classes, get your registration, and you will not be disappointed. It's the greatest show in the world. If you've never been there, I highly encourage you to go, and if you have been there, you know what I'm talking about. And again, I'll be presenting my class, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, Tuesday, April 21st from 8 a.m. till noon. And I would be so honored if you chose to attend it. It's a 4-hour class, but every year I revise it and I offer new information, some based on my own experiences, some by following events in the fire service, and some, again, provided by you, my listeners, or people maybe that have been in my class, giving me ideas and stories to share in my professional volunteer fire department class. So I'm honored to do that, and I'm ready to deliver another great class next year, and I really hope that you can join me on Tuesday, April 21st from 8 a.m. to noon. And again, for the 6th year in a row, Honeywell and DuPont are sponsoring the FDIC Scholarship, and that allows lucky first responders to attend FDIC. And folks, this is such an awesome deal. It's an awesome opportunity to get to FDIC if maybe your department doesn't have the budget to do it, or you just aren't able to send anybody at all. This allows some deserving member to attend FDIC, and everything is paid for. Airfare, lodging, admission, all the training, including the hands-on, the seminars, the exhibits, absolutely everything. All the information to look into that scholarship or maybe nominate somebody you think is deserving is on the website fdicscholarship.com. So it's not too early to begin thinking about and getting fired up and ready for FDIC 2020 next April in Indianapolis. So looking forward to that. In the meantime, winter is here, December is here, the holiday season is approaching, and I've talked about this in length in previous shows that I've done in December. I just want to remind everyone, December is a horrifically dangerous month for the American Fire Service. We've reviewed time and time again many of the incidents in the past that have occurred in the month of December that have taken the lives of brother and sister firefighters, as well as countless civilians. So historically, it's a dangerous month. Please be safe. I'd be negligent if I didn't mention that today is the 20th anniversary of the Worcester, Massachusetts cold storage warehouse fire that resulted in the death of 6 firefighters. It was 20 years ago today, December 3rd. And that horrific fire just joins a long list of terrible December fires. Lady of Angels fire in Chicago, killing 92 children, 4 nuns back in 1958. Another Chicago fire in December of 2010. Chicago lost 2 firefighters, and that was on the 100th anniversary of a stockyard fire in Chicago that killed 21 firefighters. But it's not just Chicago. It's even my hometown, Buffalo, New York, with 5 firefighters killed on December 27th, 1983, in a propane explosion. 3 FDNY firefighters in December 18th, in a fire in New York City. I could go on and on and on. Keokuk, Iowa, was a fire in December of 1999 that killed 3 firefighters and 3 children. And it's not just fires, the horrific ambush and shooting of firefighters not too far from my hometown, West Webster, New York, which is just east of us in the Rochester, New York areas. On Christmas Eve, a routine car fire that the volunteers showed up for and were met with a man with a gun, and 2 firefighters were killed in the line of duty. Just terrible. Just a reminder to be careful, be safe, because December is a rough month in our history, and we want to remember those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice as well. So take a moment, think about them, read their stories, educate your members, and be safe as we roll into the Christmas and holiday season. Tonight, I have a great guest lined up. I am so honored to have Ali Rothrock on the show. Ali is a speaker, she's an author, she's an educator, she's an activist. Heck, what else doesn't she do? Well, she's also the CEO and lead instructor for On the Job and Off, which is an online platform dedicated to building more resilient first responders. She hosts a podcast, and I love the name, Over a Cup Podcast. Enjoy a cup of coffee as you are listening into her podcast. That's a podcast dedicated to first responders, first responders who face challenges after dealing with trauma, mass casualty incidents, any other serious incident that we see in our line of work. She's delivered well over 500 presentations nationwide. She's also been involved in our great volunteer fire service. That's what we're here to talk about this evening, because she's the author of a book, Where Hope Lives, which is a memoir detailing her journey through her first years in the fire service. And she does so much more, is involved in so many things, and I hope that we can cover a lot of the great work that she's done and a lot of the great organizations she's part of. But I want to start with her journey in the fire service and her first few years in the fire service that her book goes into so well. So I would like to welcome her to the show. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Ali, your podcast, yes, in your podcast, Over the Cup, I want you to know I am enjoying a cup of coffee right now as I speak with you in your honor.
There
so thank you for being here.
Awesome.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. You know, I was privileged to hear you speak at the VCOS conference. VCOS, of course, listeners, is the Volunteer and Combination Officer section of the International Association of Fire Chiefs. I was out in Phoenix back, I think it was in May, doing my short presentation on, and Ali did the keynote address. And, you know, I talk about, and I mentioned at the beginning here, that I'm always looking for new material and topics to cover regarding professional behavior and professionalism in our volunteer fire service. And I listened to Ali. You delivered such a passionate, gripping, and I got to say at the same time, a very horrifying and disturbing account of your experiences in our fire service, your early experiences. I mean, for 2 hours, you held us spellbound. You could have heard a pin drop as you talked about that journey you traveled, and how in the face of outright abuse, you certainly remained determined to become, you know, a more well-respected firefighter and put all this aside. And, you know, you gave me a whole new platform to talk about in my presentation, and that's, you know, how do we have to treat each other a little differently, and sometimes in our fire service, I think we forget that. So if you wouldn't mind, Ali, that's where I'd like to start. Can you take us through your journey, how you got in the fire service, and what happened, and take it from there?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I grew up in central Pennsylvania, joined the volunteer fire service when I was 16, kind of out of the blue. No one in my family is a firefighter. It was something that I really just stumbled upon when, you know, I was in high school, and I was very much looking for something that I really felt like I was passionate about, something that really challenged me, something that I wanted to be a part of for the rest of my life. And I found firefighting and knew, you know, right away, this is the thing that I have always been looking for. And so I just kind of hit the ground running, and, you know, I was 16. I didn't even have my essentials yet, no Fire One. I didn't even have a driver's license when I joined. But I just really hit the ground running, and expected to, you know, have to prove myself, expected to have to meet every standard that there is for a firefighter, of course, expected to have to go through all of that and kind of make a place for myself in this community of firefighters that already existed there. And so I was certainly expecting to have to do all of that, but what I didn't expect was that there to already be an idea and a stereotype of who these people in this firehouse thought I was going to be. They already thought they knew how I was going to walk and talk and act, just based on who they thought women firefighters were or who they could be in their firehouse. And so they didn't really ever see me there as a serious firefighter. I don't think they really saw me as someone to train or to teach. I think they just saw me there as kind of for them, and they would ask me to do really inappropriate things. They would condition my training on, you know, we'll teach you this, we'll do this if you will go such and such with this guy. And it was so surprising to me, and so such a just unfamiliar situation for me, that I really didn't know what to make of it for a while. I wasn't, you know, ever used to being in those situations before, or, you know, to be in a place where I wasn't safe. That hadn't ever been something that happened to me before. But I knew that I loved firefighting.
Ali, were you? Can I just ask? Were you? Can I just ask? Were you, so you're joining at 16, which a lot of volunteer departments accept members at 16. Some even at 14 or 12 if they have really explorer type posts,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a certain stereotype already figured out for you. You're entering this male-dominated, obviously adrenaline-fueled world of firefighting, and they had a stereotype for you. But were you one of the first females in your department? Did other females come through before you that also had to put up with this? Do you know, or were you one of the first maybe?
I think there was a small handful of women that came through before me, but I think they, nothing against them, took the path of least resistance and, did what they had to do to fit into that stereotype, because then it was better and maybe safer for them. So I didn't have an example to follow of what it looked like to just be yourself, be true to who you are, and that's okay, and you can be here and be a firefighter. I didn't have that example to follow, so I kind of had to make my own way through this world that was telling me, we don't want you the way that you are. We want you to change yourself and become this type of person to fit into this idea of who we think a young girl or a young woman should be and how she should act and how we should be allowed to treat her. So I really was, just up against it in this environment, knowing that I loved firefighting so much, but being in these situations that I'd never faced before, didn't really feel like I had anyone to turn to really in that department, and just really felt stuck. I didn't know kind of what to do with the situations that I was being kind of handed. But every time I got to go on a call or I got to learn something new or help somebody, on a call, that was when I was like, I know I'm in my right place. I know I want to keep doing this. I just have to figure out how to endure the environment that I found myself in.
Wow. And if I remember correctly, you got hooked at a community event. I talk so often about community events being a great way to recruit members.
Yeah.
And display
it was a Fire
professionalism.
Prevention Week.
Okay, at your hometown.
Yeah, it was
had you given
house.
much thought about doing it before that day?
Never crossed my mind. Never crossed my mind. I don't know what it was about that day, but when I walked into the firehouse, just because my parents were like, oh, it's something to do for the day, I knew as soon as I took one step in that firehouse, I knew that it was where I wanted to be.
Wow, which I think happens to a lot of people. And
it really does, it gets us.
And you fell in love with everything about it, other than
loved it.
The worst part about it here that we're talking about.
Right.
But you knew what you were meant to do, and you wanted to work hard and dedicate yourself to learning as much as you could and become a better firefighter. But it wasn't. Was it right away that you realized, as much as you were trying to become a better firefighter, that people had other ideas?
It was pretty immediately. It was pretty directly, and then I think it just took my. I'm 30 now, so I think it took my 16-year-old mind a little bit of time to fully comprehend what the situation was and what I was being asked to do and kind of the situation I found myself. I think it took me a bit to kind of come to terms with it. And really, for a while, that's just what I thought the fire service was. That was my only experience with it, right? So now,
you're thinking this is normal.
15 years later, I have been to so many fantastic firehouses and fought fire with so many wonderful people, and that's the majority of firefighters. The vast majority of firefighters are good people. But I didn't know that at first because this was my only experience. And so I really thought, if I want to be a firefighter, this is what also comes with it, because that's all I had known up to that point.
Wow. And did you, I don't want to get too graphic here, and I don't want to put you through any painful memories and things, but... No,
I'm very used to it. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you wouldn't mind, for some of the audience, I was just spellbound when you were talking, because I could not believe firefighters could do this to other firefighters. We talk about our fantastic brother and sisterhood. We talk about just how wonderful firehouse life is and how it's family.
Which is so true and real most of the time, yes.
And I think you hit us right off the bat. You were out in the truck bay and they wanted you to go into an equipment room or something, right? I mean, it was just so, I just could not believe things like this were happening.
In order to get one of my questions answered, it was kind of conditional on meeting going with this guy in this closet and not telling anybody what happened in there and just kind of letting it happen. That happened pretty directly after I joined. And like I said, I know that's not the majority of firehouses now, but back then I really didn't. And like you mentioned, we think of firehouses as being safe, good places full of safe, good people. And that's 99% of it. And that's why we love the fire service, because it's such a great big family. But I also think it's really important to recognize, and this is something that I teach nationally now, and we can talk about that a bit later, but, you know, I talk about sexual violence and the sexual violence continuum and what that looks like in the fire service, because I think we sometimes have this idea of who could be a perpetrator of sexual violence and who could not be. We think maybe somebody's profession precludes them from being someone who would be sexually violent. We think, oh, this person's a professor or a police officer or a politician or a teacher or whatever, and we think that person could never do this. But those people could. It doesn't have anything to do with their job. It has to do with who they are as individuals. And I think that was something I ran up against a lot when I tried to get help in the beginning, was people said, oh, that would never happen. A firefighter would never do that. And that's
right.
something, so, you know, that I instruct on a lot now is, you know, believing people when they tell you that something like this happens, because, you know, quite most often they are absolutely telling the truth.
And if I remember correctly, I think you said you tried talking to people about it, and it was dismissed as simple hazing and nothing to get worked up about.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have anyone you could go to, or were they just like, don't worry about it?
I had a couple of people here and there. My parents, you know, are absolutely my biggest support system and just champion and cheerleaders. But, you know, like I mentioned when I speak, I made the decision really early on to keep a lot of this stuff from them because I knew they would not let me go back to the firehouse, rightly so. And so I kind of, you know, eliminated that support system through my own action of not talking about it. And I'm a very independent person, and I can be a very stubborn person. And so I remember thinking really early on, like, this is my thing to figure out. This is my thing to sort through, and I can do it. But I do think in terms of people in the fire service that I tried to talk to, and again, you know, we see this a lot, is I don't think anyone really wanted to acknowledge what was going on, because then if they acknowledged it, then they couldn't ignore it anymore. And so I think it was easier to just pretend they didn't see it, because then they can be like, I don't know what you're talking about, therefore I don't need to take any action. And so I think that's what happened a lot, was just people, you know, weren't brave enough to stand up to the stuff I was standing up to, and so they just pretended it wasn't happening.
And was it more than sexual type violence? Was there other hostility toward you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was everything. Tons of hostility, threats. I mean, the longer that I stayed and the more I ran up against that stereotype and refused to cave into, you know, who they wanted me to be, the worse it became. And so I did experience a sexual assault in a firehouse, not in Pennsylvania, when I was on a ride-along during that same time. But I kind of say, like, that was the cherry on top of the trauma that I experienced. It was much more of a steady drip of just harassment and threats and not feeling safe in my town, in my school, because, you know, those firefighters' kids went to school with me. It just became this very insidious, pervasive, like, darkness that just kind of enveloped my end of high school years.
And for the listeners out there, I just want to take a second here. We have a 16-year-old finding her passion in the fire service, and within a very short time of setting foot in that firehouse is subjected to sexual violence, other signs of bullying and harassment, and attempting to take it to other people to say, hey, what's going on here, being told you're being too sensitive, it's simply hazing. We do it to all the new people. What are we doing here, folks?
Mm-hmm.
This is anything but professional behavior in any organization, but one organization we know that is constantly talked about for having such great family atmosphere and brotherhood and sisterhood and camaraderie is the fire service. And something like this happens. Now, I know there's bad people in every organization. So my question is, Ali, where's the leadership? Was there none?
I get asked that a lot, because that's a great question, right? Like, where are the people that were supposed to be standing up? And my answer is the leadership was the worst of them. So I
Wow.
had no options of who to go to. And again, you might think, well, fire chief, that, they would never do that. Why not? Sometimes they do. And that was the environment that I found myself in. And when I instruct now and travel nationally, and with the work that my company does, we do a lot of leadership stuff to talk about what were some steps that could have been taken. And even before any of that more, abusive things, how do we stop that mentality of women don't belong before you ever get your first woman firefighter? Like, how do we go back there that far and prevent these types of things? So yeah, I mean, like I say, I learned how to be a leader in the fire service from seeing what not to do. In my first couple of years. Luckily now, for the last decade, I've had fantastic leadership examples and have no shortage of people to look to that inspire me and make me better. But definitely in the beginning there, I just remember thinking, if I can do the opposite of everything I'm seeing in this firehouse, I'll be okay.
Right, which is often talked about in great leadership classes, and great leaders all the time will say you can learn just as much from a bad leader as you can from a good leader.
True. So, it's unfortunately very true.
It is. So if you wouldn't mind, spend a couple minutes then talking about, so you join your firehouse here, the local firehouse. You're a young girl, this is happening, but you're muddling on, you're going through it. You didn't leave, you were determined. And how did you get into a ride-along? Because that's where it all culminated, correct? That's where things really came to a head,
that's
so to
right.
speak. Because if you wouldn't mind taking us on that journey.
Yeah, so it was a couple of weeks before I was supposed to go away to college to get my fire science degree, which was something that, in high school everybody's like, what do you want to go to college for? And as soon as I found firefighting and found you could go to college for it, I said, that's it. So I was a couple weeks away from doing that and finally being able to leave this town that just held so much trauma for me. And I had this moment of panic where I realized, like I said before, I'd only ever known the fire service to be one way. And that was a way where I certainly was not safe to be. And I just had this moment where I thought, what if there's nothing better that I'm working towards? Like, what if there is no good firehouse that I've been holding out for? What if this is how it is forever? And the one option was to panic about that. But the second option was, I thought, okay, I'm going to get myself to another firehouse and I'm going to see if I can experience something different. And if I can experience something different, then I'm going to know that I just got unlucky with where I grew up and what my volunteer firefighter option was. And I'm going to know that I can go to college, there's going to be good people, good firefighters there, and, it'll be no problem. So I went with another firefighter that I knew down to this busy firehouse, and it was on that ride along that I experienced a sexual assault. And at that point, it was about 3 years into me being a firefighter. And, when I speak, I talk about like trauma and the chronic trauma exposure that firefighters sometimes have. They can be like drops in a bucket, and you're carrying those drops in a bucket just fine. It's not overflowing until one day you get a big enough drop and it makes the bucket overflow, and you're no longer managing the experiences that you've kind of been piling up. And the experience I had at that firehouse was very much like my final drop in a bucket. It was the thing that made that bucket overflow, and my mental health took its first downward dip, and I just really kind of shut off and went to college and just really wanted to start over and be somebody that didn't have all these terrible things happen to them. And unfortunately, that's not how life works. You have to deal with things and process them and square with them. And that's something that took me a long time to do. But like you mentioned, the book that I wrote, I was writing the entire time that I was firefighting. It was my way at first just to document how much I loved it and all the new things I was learning and how cool that was. But it became the only place where I was recording the truth about what was happening to me, because I didn't think I'd ever be able to say it out loud. And so when I was in college, I had like 22, 23 journals that were full of everything I'd experienced in the fire service. And I just started kind of rewriting those memories into a Word document, because I thought maybe I can figure out like why I'm so angry all the time, or maybe I can figure out how to go back to the person I was before I joined the fire service. I liked her better. Maybe it's there in one of these journal pages that I wrote in. And so I ended up kind of poring over all those pages for the time I was in school. And when I got out, I realized I had written a story that I thought could mean something and matter to somebody other than me. It was about redemption and forgiveness and closure and all those things. And so I self-published it. It's called Where Hope Lives. And yeah, that's really what got me into speaking about 10 years ago.
Wow. What a great way to channel some anger, I guess, and frustrations. And
it was everything, yeah. And it was also, I think, the title of the book is Where Hope Lives. It was me needing to find hope in that I knew the fire service could be good. I just had never experienced it, but I still believed that I could find that place. And so, hope is a big part of my life. It's not just like a throwaway word to me. It's action. It's moving forward, knowing that things can be better. And so Where Hope Lives was something that I think I needed, like I literally needed to write it, or I don't know that I would have survived the healing of it all. I think it was something that had to come out of me, and I needed to get it out and give it away for the hopes that it could help somebody else if they were struggling. And that's, a wonderful thing that I've been able to watch it do for these last about 9 years. I'm looking at the very first copy of Where Hope Lives that I ever printed right now. I'm looking at it in my office and just kind of remembering 9 years ago all that it took to get that book to life.
Wow, well, you're a remarkable young woman still at 30. That's still very young. You've done so much, and you've endured so much.
Thank you.
And again, as you were talking, I just found myself, as others did in the room that I was sitting near, I know they did it. We became so angry at the fire service that we all love so much, and
right.
As professional firefighters, I don't care, paid, volunteer, doesn't matter. As a professional, you obviously would be equally as angry and as the people in the room who are listening to speak. And I love how you talk about hope.
I get that reaction a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get that reaction a lot. I just spoke for the BCS again in Florida, and like I said, I speak nationally to big groups of chiefs, and I do that a lot, and I get that response often as people saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm really angry," all those things, and I appreciate that. But my honest answer when I hear that is, you don't have to be sorry because I'm not. It's definitely okay now. And to that anger, I say, okay, that's good. What are we going to do with that anger? Like, don't just walk out of this conference room and go back to your firehouse where people are making rape jokes, or people are saying they will never work with or for a woman. Take that anger and do something with it, because my story and me telling it does nothing if it doesn't inspire you or motivate you or cause you to act differently. And so the company that I run, On the Job and Off, we have a course. It's one of our most popular ones. It's called The Way Forward, Ending Sexual Harassment and Sexual Violence in the Fire Service. And like I said, it's our most popular one because it's me talking about these things, and people hear my story and they think that's terrible, but that would never happen in my firehouse, right? Like something that extreme wouldn't happen. And I say, I hope you're right. You're probably right. But there are similarities between my story. The similar things are happening in every single firehouse. Either you're not seeing it, or it's so normalized that it's not even noticeable anymore, or it's something really subtle that only your women firefighters would notice. Like, there are threads just because of the society and the culture that we live in. And so what are we doing with that? If we really want to make the fire service a place where I don't have to tell my story anymore because nothing like that ever happens, how are we going to get us to that place? What are we each doing as leaders, as rookies, as whoever? What are we doing to move that needle and make our firehouses safer for everybody?
Right. I keep going back to something here, and I want to take just a step back, and I can't believe it. So you join your firehouse, and then you go to another firehouse, and it picks right up again. So
That's
the
right.
first two experiences you had with the fire service, you're being assaulted or bullied or harassed. And I know there's going to be people out there saying that you had to be doing something to, right? That's the normal reaction. Oh, you probably did hear you're being too sensitive, what's going on. But how did you first attempt to say, hey, I know you guys think it's funny, let's be serious here? I mean, was there things you were trying to do and they just kept coming back and attacking you, both physically and verbally?
I was very clear up front, very, I am here to be a firefighter. I am here to learn how to do this job. You've been doing it longer than me, so please teach me what you know. I was very clear, never once ever wavered from that professional piece. I was there, in a professional capacity always. That line was never, ever, ever crossed, because I crossed it willingly, never.
Wow.
And, when people would say something, I would say, like, please don't talk to me like that, or that rape joke isn't funny, or, whatever. I was very, open about, like, that's not funny. I don't appreciate that. Don't talk to me like that, all of those things. And it just made it worse. It just really made it worse. And so yeah, I mean, people make their assumptions because I think they don't want to see what could really be happening sometimes. And sometimes people just shouldn't be firefighters. They don't live up to what a firefighter should be through their actions. And unfortunately, I found a whole group of those people right there in my hometown.
Wow. And I just want to take a moment here to remind our listeners that this is Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio, and I'm Tom Merrill, host of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. And if anyone would like to call in on our last live show, the number to call in on, if you want to talk to Ali and have any questions for her or discuss these events with her, please call at 760-454-8852. I'm sure she'd be happy to talk to you and answer any questions you might have. And so here you are, Ali, after the second firehouse and after this assault. I believe then you talked about, your world was really spinning. You're completely shattered. Any sense of safety you ever had is shattered, and you walked away from the service and you went into college and things. You probably determined never to step foot in a firehouse again, right? So
that's right.
And then you were introduced to somebody who really helped you. Am I right with that? I'm relying on my handwritten notes from listening to you talk. Did you not?
There were a couple of people here and there. Who are you talking about? There are a few in there.
Well, there was a therapist, I believe, that really helped.
Oh,
straighten
sure,
you
yeah.
out.
That's a
about
bunch of years later. But yeah, just to kind of fill in the gap there between those years. So yes, that absolutely did happen. But before I got to that place, so I published my book and did that for about a year, and then realized that as determined as I was to never go back to the fire service, even though I loved it so much, it felt like a big part of my life that was missing. And I was really determined to find that good firehouse where I always knew just had to exist. And so I went back, I joined a new fire company and met a lot of really cool people, was encouraged to train, was encouraged to learn all of these things. And so that was great. And for a long time, it was the firehouse that I wanted it to be. And then unfortunately, a new person joined that firehouse that really did not want women around. And he was very big and very loud and very scary. And nobody was standing up to the things that he was doing. And me being the only woman in that firehouse, I took the brunt of all of his comments and all of his harassment and just everything. And that
a new member, somebody joining after you.
That's right.
Somebody joining after
that
you.
Experience,
and no one. Wow.
Yes, and so what ended up happening was that those experiences with him triggered all of the trauma that had been sitting in my brain that I never dealt with from my first experiences in the firehouse. And that's when my mental health started to really, really get bad because I never dealt with, the feelings of not being safe, just the ripple effects of trauma and how that impacts how you see yourself, how you see yourself in the world, how you see yourself in relationships, how you can trust people. All of that was so, so, so injured that I needed to talk to somebody who could help me understand trauma. But I stubbornly did not want to do that for a long time. I thought, I can figure this out. I can muscle my way through this. Remember, I said independent and stubborn. So that's how I approached this mental health issue. I knew that I wasn't well. I knew that it wasn't sustainable the way that I was living, with like sleeping problems and eating problems and like breaking out in hives because I was so stressed and having like anxiety and just all these problems. They just couldn't continue, but I didn't want to like let go of the control, kind of, because I'd just been muscling my way through these problems by myself for so long. It took me months and months until I was finally ready to ask for help, and I was lucky enough to find a wonderful therapist on the first try. That does not happen often. But she was somebody who completely set me back on track and helped me process what I'd experienced. And the biggest thing she did was that she validated for me how traumatic basically all my time in the fire service had been. Because as survivors, we tell ourselves, it wasn't that bad. I shouldn't be this affected. I should have been able to shake it off faster. I should have been tougher, whatever. But for her, a professional who was unbiased, who was, not judging and could just sit there and say, no, what you experienced was objectively traumatic, and here's why it makes sense that you're feeling this way, and here's what we can do about it. And she gave me the diagnosis of PTSD, which I originally rejected because it didn't make sense to me. I thought soldiers had PTSD and that's it. But she said, well, the highest percentage of people, right? She said the highest percentage of people living with PTSD in this country are sexual assault survivors. And I'd never thought of myself that way before. I had never put those words onto what I experienced. I was just busy trying to not think about it. So through a lot of work with her, therapy is work, and this was years ago, she helped me get back on track. And really, through coming through that experience and realizing what a gift the PTSD diagnosis was for me. I know that seems kind of counterintuitive, like I don't want someone to tell me that something's wrong with me. I knew something was wrong, and having a name on it made it real, and it made it, not something that I was making up. And once I started to get better, I really wanted to become an advocate. And so I started working with women and children who had experienced sexual violence or who were fleeing actively lethal domestic violence, working on a sexual assault response team, working in a domestic violence shelter, seeing the power of advocacy, of connection, of story, of support, of hope, seeing that power, and giving that to these women that I was lucky enough to work with and to help. And so I started to take a lot of classes and to really want to know more about trauma and mental health and what it looks like to come through that on the other side. And so I got a couple of national trauma responder certifications. I took a big, couple 80-hour college courses on trauma, just really trying to understand more and feeling like I'm feeling led to know more about this. And I went back to college to get a psychology degree, and I was speaking so much. I was speaking, all over the place, to firefighters, to chiefs, conferences, all these things. And it got to the point last year where I couldn't keep up with all of the speaking engagement requests that were coming in, and I just couldn't get to everywhere. I was talking about mental health, for first responders, primarily, having our mental health affected by things that we see in the course of doing our jobs, how that impacts us, our families, our coping skills, all these things. And so last year I had the idea to put the courses that I teach in person, put them online. And so I started a company called On the Job and Off. We do online and in-person mental health training for first responders. We serve fire, EMS, and dispatchers. And that is what I do now, is I run that company full-time. So, the book, speaking, all of that led me to where I am now, which is somebody who is still very much involved in the fire service, and putting all my education and experience, channeling that all into this company that I can then turn around and help firefighters.
Wow. And if I remember, you're also working on a sequel, right? Another book.
Oh, yes. If I could clone myself, it would be done. But yeah, I'm telling you, I do not. But it's getting there. It's called After, and it'll be done. 2020 is my goal, so maybe your listeners can help hold me to that. But yeah, it's called After.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's hold ourselves to that, because I also am doing a book for Penwell, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. I'm very proud of that. They asked me to put a book together based on my presentation, and my goal is as well to get that done in 2020. So we'll hold each other accountable, okay?
Okay.
Because there's always things that you're doing and you're thinking, I should be working on my book right now.
Right. Next week I'll have time, and then it just never happens.
Oh, the time. The gift of PTSD. Wow. You're amazing.
Yes.
The gift of PTSD. But that opened that was such a relief for you probably to get that, and then she helped you.
It was.
Was she the one? Was she the one that I'm trying to remember if you told this in your presentation? I heard it elsewhere that described PTSD as like an injury that can be healed.
Yeah. Right.
And I
like
just thought that was
bone.
so cool. Like
and it's as real, it's as literal. PTSD is a chemical difference in your body. So your adrenaline, your cortisol, all those things, they're way off the chart. They don't kick in at the appropriate times, or they're always at 100%. It's a real physical change in someone's body. And we think just because it's in your head, it's not real, or it's less real. Like we think that about mental health. I can't see your depression, therefore it's not real. But no, it was validation that she gave me, and that empowered me to let go of shame, to let go of anger that I had at myself for not knowing that these things were going to happen, and therefore not protecting myself better. Like you jump through all these hoops in your mind to try to make sense of something that just doesn't make sense. And so for her, she gave me that she showed me the way forward. The course that we do is called The Way Forward, but she kind of showed me that. And then I took that opportunity, because everything is a choice, right? You probably heard me talk about this. I talk about choice a lot. I was making choices constantly of who I was going to be in these situations, who I was going to be in these environments. When I got my PTSD diagnosis, I made the choice that I was going to be more than that. I was going to be more than someone with a disorder in my brain. I was going to be more than someone who experienced these terrible things. And I think speaking, and especially creating on the job and off, is me doing that. It's me being more than the things that happened to me. It's me not being afraid to tell my story out loud, to not be afraid of the questions that comes with it, and to turn around and be more than that and give stuff back to the fire service. Because the way that we either stop firefighters dying by suicide because they don't have support in their firehouse or at their home, dealing with stuff that they see on their job, firefighters being sexually harassed, assaulted, leaving the fire service because it's just an untenable work environment for them. The way we prevent those things is by having conversations early, and taking it back to how to treat people and why, and what it looks like and what it can look like if we don't treat people well. And so that's what I'm so passionate about, is telling my story, but doing it kind of through the lens of, let's talk about how to make the fire service better, because it's a place that we all love and want to be. Right.
Now, there's two things I want to talk about. One is what we can do to help each other, but also how to prevent things like this from happening. And maybe they're kind of related, but what are some things we can do to help each other out or take care of a sister or brother firefighter that might be having a rough time? It's okay to talk, isn't it? The old days of keeping things to yourself.
Right.
What did you call it?
Suck it up.
Stubborn and
independent. Yeah.
Independent.
And I think a lot of firefighters. Yeah. Stubborn, independent,
for sure.
We're problem solvers. We are the people with the answers, right? But
and
then
you can't show
what
weakness or think it's weak,
Exactly.
like I can't show
think if I say this call
what
bothers
should we
me,
be aware
that
of?
means I can't do my job. Yeah. So I mean,
right,
I think the first thing we can do is we as an individual have to be willing to take the step to say, that call bothered me, or I'm having trouble sleeping since that call yesterday, or that just made me think of my son or my mother or whoever. Being the ones to, if you notice that somebody's struggling because they did CPR on an infant last week and you notice they just don't seem like themselves, are you as an individual, aside from department policy, SOP, SOG, whatever, are you willing to pull that person aside and say, hey, I notice you don't seem like yourself. What's going on? Are you willing to do that? But we think, I don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't have time to talk to that person right now. We think all these things. And then those conversations just never happen, and that person keeps feeling alone. And yes, we want everyone to feel like they could come to us and talk. But we have to first be willing to set that example to show it's okay to talk about these things. And especially for leaders, you set the tone, right? Like I do CISM call-outs, or I work one-on-one with individuals across multiple disciplines, and it bothers me so much when either chiefs will not come to the CISM, they're making jokes about it, they won't support their members going, you are asking for such trouble in your firehouse if you as a leader don't support the mental health resources that are there. And so I think the biggest thing is we have to be willing to talk about it. Like most of us, I've had calls that sit in my brain, or maybe my mind replayed for a couple of days after. We've all had that, but we're not usually willing to talk about that. And so I think that's the biggest thing is, as an individual, we have to decide that we're going to be okay with setting the example for being open about how this job affects us.
And what I get from most people who are willing to do that, even some of the older firefighters who understand, hey, we got to approach things differently today. It's a different world, different fire service, rightly so. It should be. But the concern is, they get nervous or scared when they do the usual tagline, hey, you good? If the person responds, no, I'm not, because now they don't know what to do. What
right, and that's a common
thing. You ask somebody,
right?
you reach out, hey, you doing all right? You doing all right? And they say no. What, as a brother or sister firefighter, can we do? What should we say or do?
A couple of things. I mean, obviously the first thing is, well, tell me about that. Tell me what's going on. Now, listen, I'm not saying everybody, like, I'm not asking people to counsel anybody. I'm not asking you to therapize anybody. I'm not asking you to do anything other than just sit with that person and listen. And if they say they're really struggling after a call, tell them that it makes sense that they're struggling, because what they saw or what they experienced was really, really difficult. Validate for them, just like my therapist validated for me, that there wasn't something wrong with me that's making me struggle. Like, what I experienced was difficult and challenging, and it's okay that I'm struggling. Something that I, also say to people is, I'm really, really sorry to hear that that's happening, and I can't fix it right away, but I can promise that you won't be alone in dealing with it. So, you're not saying I'm going to hold your hand. You're not saying that I'm going to fix it. You're just saying, I'm in this with you now, and you're not by yourself. And that I found is really comforting to people. It was comforting to me.
And maybe as an organization, as a chief or president, commissioner, such as myself, maybe you have in your back pocket on file or available is some resources available for referring.
And that's huge. That's key. Like I say, we, as a commissioner, as any leader, we're really good at knowing our emergency resources, right? If I needed 15 tankers in 5 minutes, dispatch knows where to get those 15 tankers. If I need hazmat, if I need a whole bunch of paramedics, state troopers, whatever it is, that has been thought through and who those people are. If you need lumber for shoring for a structural collapse, those contracts are in place. You know where you're getting that lumber from if that were to ever happen. So we do those things. We have these contingency plans for stuff that will probably never happen, but we don't often do the same things with mental health. So, like, if you had a firefighter in crisis, that maybe their reason for crisis had nothing to do with the fire service, but you're the one who is now tasked with helping them, who are you calling? Do you know, volunteer fire companies don't have EAPs, but do you know the crisis hotline for your county? Does your hospital have, a counselor who will come to that person? Sometimes that happens. Is there a mobile crisis? There are a ton of resources that we just don't think about until we have someone in crisis, and then that's not our best time to be making decisions, right? So just like we're prepared for everything else that might happen, if a plane crashed into our firehouse, we know who to call. Dispatch knows who's coming. But are we doing that same thing with mental health? So I always challenge people to, like, Google in your county, who are your top 3 mental health resources, and put them in your phone so you're not scrambling to come up with something when you have someone who really needs help. Do you have a CISM team? Get that number down. Figure out who those people are so you know who they are when you need them.
And don't criticize or make fun of or mock anyone that maybe shares a reaction to a certain call or situation they experienced.
Yeah, and because I see people do that, and what that tells me is that person who's making fun can really, really relate to what that other person is saying, and they're doing that as a way to just distance themselves from that feeling. It's hitting a little too close to home. And so when people do that, like at a CISM, I never really get mad because I know where that's coming from. But you're right, yeah, that's not helping anybody to make fun of someone who comes forward.
So what can we do in our firehouses to maybe prevent or limit the behavior that you experience. I think, God, and you said it earlier, and I've experienced it too. I've been fortunate enough now that I've been doing much more traveling than I've ever done and never expected to be doing, talking about professional development in the volunteer fire service. And also I do some leadership consult training and lecturing as well. Anyway, I've been traveling, and I got to say, every time I come home, my wife says, so how was the trip? And I leave, I'm always nervous. How's it going to go? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to, people going to like me, or am I going to like them? And every time I come home, I think I've always said to my wife, those are the nicest people I've ever met. So there's so many good people out there. There's so many good people and great professional firefighters out there.
Yeah, but that's why we love this job. Yeah.
Absolutely. But we do need to remind ourselves, we do need to create a culture and continue with the culture if it already exists. It existed in your department, your third department, it existed, and then someone came in and tore it apart. So we need to have plans in place and policies, procedures, whatever you want to call it, to limit this type of behavior. What can we do within the firehouse walls as an organization to help prevent this?
It's a good question. And I mean, I think you can have, like, I think all the firehouses, well, some of the firehouses I've been a part of, they had policies for this kind of stuff. People just ignored them. So, you know, those things are nothing more than words on a page if no one's going to enforce them. And when you talk about, you know, what do we do to prevent things like this, the short answer is leadership, everybody, but specifically leadership, has to be willing to have hard conversations about what is acceptable, why something is not acceptable, whether it's behavior or an action, and then they have to be willing to follow through with whatever, you know, disciplinary action is necessary. And if you're a leader and you're not willing to have hard conversations, I would argue that you're not ready to be a leader, or you're not willing to lead in the way that you might sometimes be required to. And I think having hard conversations about behavior and comments and jokes or whatever, it's hard and it's uncomfortable, and that's why most people don't do it. But you have to be willing to say, this is what's acceptable in this firehouse. We are not going to make rape jokes. We are not going to objectify women's bodies. We are not going to talk sexually about our women firefighters. We are not going to do those things. And if anyone is overheard doing those things, XYZ steps 1, 2, 3 are going to happen. And then you have to be willing to follow through. I mean, it's very basic and it's simple, but yet it continues to not happen because, you know, the fire service is obviously so male dominated, and that culture, just like it exists in our society of what women's place is and what women's place is not, just like it's pervasive in our society, it's pervasive in our firehouse as well. And so again, those hard conversations, you have to be willing to have them, or we're just going to get nowhere.
It always is about strong leadership. It's always about the leadership,
right?
Isn't it? So much.
Yeah.
And in your situation, leadership was part of the problem. My gosh, you were really in a quandary there, weren't you, Ali?
I was stuck. Yeah, and I think, you know, there's so many leadership classes, and rightfully so. Right, this is so crucial. How to lead at major incidents. You know, any size structure fire, mass casualty incidents, whatever. Like, that is obviously so important. But we do not lead or teach on how to lead through a line of duty death from the perspective of your mental health and your firefighter's mental health. How to talk about how gender discrimination increases women firefighters' suicide risk by a ton. We're not aware of those things. We don't talk about those things. We are not trained on how to lead through those difficult situations, and that's the gap that I'm trying to fill with On the Job and Off and the courses that we teach, because those things just aren't being talked about. Now, there are some like mental health and sexual violence, anti-sexual violence courses, but the ones that I've seen, they're oversimplified, they're sanitized, they talk around the issues, and that just gets us nowhere. So what we try to do is have those really open conversations, knowing that we want to make the fire service better, and we want everybody who has a desire to be a firefighter to have just the opportunity to walk into a firehouse and to be safe while they're there. And if they decide that it's not for them, cool. Thanks for trying. But no one should ever leave the fire service because they feel unsafe around the people that they work with. And that happens just time and time and time again from women firefighters all over the country. And I know that because they're constantly emailing me or sending me social media messages, talking to me about difficult things that they're going through.
Not feeling safe in your own firehouse is so disturbing to me. So disturbing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you just bring up so much great information. And I love the tagline for your company, On the Job and Off, because it's so true. It talks about, as firefighters, EMTs, dispatchers, law enforcement, whatever, you're prepared for every situation, but your company's prepared for what they take home with them.
Exactly.
Am I right with that? Yeah.
That's exactly it. And like
tag.
I said, because what we take home, it doesn't just affect us, right? It affects our families. And if we're volunteer, it might affect us at work. And like I say to people, whenever you decide to step away from the fire service for whatever reason, if it's tomorrow, if it's in 30 years, we're all about physical health, right? And the cancer risk and all of that, which is so important. But my goal is not to just have firefighters be physically well and whole when they step away, but to be mentally well and whole. And that's why it's on the job and off. It's not just how to deal with this stuff when you're at work, but how to deal with it when you're at home too.
Yeah, and it's often, forgotten. Mental health is obviously a big topic today, just as cancer is an app, but we focus on so many other things in the fire service because there's so much to be prepared for. But I believe I heard a stat once that 1 in 5 people have some type of mental illness, right? Isn't that the stat I heard?
Yeah, and that's civilian. Yeah, that's lifetime. So 1 in 5 civilians will have a diagnosable mental health disorder in their lifetime. But the stats for the fire service are very different naturally because of the chronic exposure to trauma that we have. So our risk for addiction goes up, our risk of divorce goes up, our risk of suicide goes up, our risk of all these things goes up because we are not trained on how to cope with the things that we're forced to see and be a part of.
Between cancer and that stat, I don't know how we're going to recruit more volunteer firefighters.
Well, the way we're going to do it is by making our firehouses places where more than just what we currently have are willing to step up and give it a try. We can't just continue to recruit to boys or to men because we're going to tap that pool, and we might be at that point where we've kind of tapped our pool there. So it's like, okay, you're missing an entire half of the population, many of whom are perfectly capable of doing this job, but they don't see themselves in it because they're not being marketed to. And so, for me, recruitment and retention, it's huge, right? And NPA, we're struggling, but there are a lot of things that I think are very obvious that people just aren't addressing. And the culture of your firehouse, I've been in the fire service a long time, and I've seen a lot of good people, both men and women, come and then go very quickly because there was no place made for them, because they were just a little bit different, not in a bad way. They just maybe did a different hobby, or they, had a different pastime that didn't, quote, fit in, and people made sure they knew they didn't fit in, and they were gone, and they'll never come to the fire service again. So I think making the culture just a little bit more open, making a place for people who we wouldn't maybe make a place for, that's how you're going to recruit more people, and then you're going to retain them by letting them know that they are safe to be there and that they're supported. If they ever were struggling, if anything were ever wrong, there are resources there, and there's people willing to listen.
Right. Make it a true firehouse, a house like your own home. Comfortable.
Right, because that's why, that's why I love firehouses I'm a part of now, because they truly feel like that. And when I travel, I love getting to see other people's firehouses because they kind of all have the same vibe, right? There's a kitchen, there's a hangout spot, and I love that. I love how warm firehouses feel. And I know that's possible for everybody to feel that in a firehouse. There's just often so many barriers that people have to get through, or in my case, like bust through, to be able to get to that warmth. And so it's there. We just have to make it available for more people.
Right. And at this time of year, too, isn't sometimes people get more stressed out at the holidays, I think, than there's everything else going on. And now you're going to calls as well.
Yeah, I just did a webinar for the NVFC on dealing with increased stress around the holidays. It's actually available to everybody, even if you're not an NVFC member, on their YouTube page. And I talked about that, about why we could feel increased stress around the holidays, whether it's like financial burden or your routine is a little bit thrown off, spending time with difficult family dynamics that you don't, people that come into town that you don't normally have to see. And I know from my experience, some of the worst, most tragic calls I've ever been a part of happened around Christmas. And I think part of what made them so tragic was the time of year that they happened in. I remember there was a situation where a child died and we were in their house and their presents were under the tree and their, picture with their family and Santa Claus was on the fridge. And that just made it hit so much closer to home, that loss. And so that's really, really real. And so it's important to try to keep our routines the best that we can, rely on our support systems if, winter and those darker months are harder for us. And just to be aware of that, maybe the holidays are difficult for you for whatever reason. Maybe you're grieving and this is the first holiday without a special person in your life. That's okay. Acknowledge that to yourself. And the summer always comes. The days always get lighter.
Snow eventually melts. That's what I always say.
That's right. Always does. Always does.
Ellie, if you wouldn't mind, I know we've talked about a lot of different things tonight, but I want to give you an opportunity again to talk about the wonderful work you're doing with your company on the job and off. So,
sure.
First of all, for anyone that's interested, the book Where Hope Lives, I know it talks about her first few years in the fire service, but the book really goes well beyond just a fire service spiel. It's also just it's about hope and overcoming obstacles and persevering against all this adversity. So I encourage you to look into possibly getting that book, because the firehouse, to me, it's just a backdrop for the story that took place, right?
Yes, exactly. And if you're interested in getting that book, I would recommend getting it on my website, aliwrothrock.com. I sign all of those books before I ship them. So, if you're interested in Where Hope Lives, you can get it on my website, aliwrothrock.com.
Okay. And next year, you'll be able to get the sequel titled After.
I know,
along
right?
with the Professional
Hopefully.
Volunteer Fire Department, hopefully.
Yes, exactly. But yes, I am happy to talk about On the Job and Off just a little bit more. So our website's up right now. If anyone wants to check it out, onthejobandOff.com. Like I said, we serve those existing disciplines. Fire is what we focused on first. That's kind of our bread and butter because that's what I know the most. And that's mainly who we serve. So we were fortunate enough to partner with the NVFC at the beginning of this year, and we offered our very first course, Capturing the Load, which is a 1-hour, 5-module mental health awareness course specifically for firefighters, instructed by me. We partnered with the NVFC to offer that course to 1,000 first responders nationwide. And we reached firefighters in every single state over 6 months. We got feedback from every single one of those firefighters because the biggest thing I needed to know is this course reaching you the way that I hope it is? Is it changing your knowledge? Is it making you more willing to get help? Is it increasing your understanding of how the job impacts you, all these things? And once we learned that this course is doing exactly that, we then asked all those people, those first 1,000, what else can we teach you? What else do you feel like you need to know? And so in kind of over the summer, beginning of the fall, I wrote and we filmed and uploaded 3 new courses, one on vicarious trauma, one on compassion, fatigue, and cumulative stress, and another on post-traumatic stress. And then we did a deep dive course, the way forward, which I spoke about, which is about ending sexual harassment and sexual violence. And then we have an additional course up on addiction, both from the perspective of a first responder who maybe is dealing with addiction personally or dealing with the opioid crisis burnout that everybody feels and just responding to, overdose after overdose after overdose to the same person or family or whatever. So we have those 6 courses up right now. On the Job and Off is an annual membership platform. That means if you become a member, you're a member for 12 months, you get access to all the courses that are currently up, and then we do put new courses out throughout the year. We have a ton of new content coming in 2020. Through the end of this year, Our annual memberships for an individual is just $29.99. So for $29, you get all of this information 24/7 for 12 months. And we wanted to make it as absolutely as inexpensive as possible because we wanted this to be financially attainable for people. But where we do the most of our work is with fire department memberships. So a chief or a training officer will, come onto the platform and they'll say, we have 200 firefighters. We just got a big department out of Georgia with 200, or 50 firefighters in Alaska, or my department in Wisconsin, we have 12 people, and we want to bring all of those firefighters onto the platform for a year. And so that's kind of our bread and butter is getting entire departments on board that allows everybody to be on the same page, to learn about the same stuff, to have the same language to talk about these things. We talk about resources and coping skills and all of that. So yeah, on the job and off, it's up there right now. We have new departments and individuals that come on constantly. There's bulk discounts for departments, and it's been really, really cool to see how departments are using it. Either they'll all sit together and take a class, or they'll say, okay, at the end of the month, try to have this class done. We're going to talk about it. It's really been helping create a space for these important conversations to happen.
Oh, great resource, great work. I talk on the show quite often about the National Volunteer Fire Council and what a great organization they are. You're involved in the Volunteer Fire Service. You should be a member of National Volunteer Fire Council and taking advantage of their resources. And you could check out the webinar Ali just did. That was just a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah, I think 2 weeks ago. Yeah, not long.
Yeah, great stuff. I downloaded the PowerPoint and read through that. Just phenomenal work that you're doing. And then you also do the podcast, Over the Cup. Again, I love that.
Right.
My coffee's gone now. But, hey, how is that fire department coffee? Don't they sponsor it, or am I wrong with that? Is it
delicious?
Fire department coffee?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, so Fire Department Coffee, we did that in partnership with them. It was always my goal to work with them. And so the fact that, we get to have their logo in our logo and just be supported by them is really, really cool. I just wrapped season 1. We did 23 consecutive episodes with really, really wonderful guests. We also have a segment on there called Clinician's Corner, where we have a clinician who works with firefighters, Dr. Ann Vizek out of California. She comes on and she responds to listener questions from firefighters. That's really cool. So, the episodes are up now on iTunes and Spotify. They're not going anywhere. And then we have season 2 coming in 2020.
Fantastic. And, Ali, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out to talk with me and us tonight, all the listeners out there. And I think you're doing wonderful work. You opened my eyes to get me out of my little bubble thinking everything's always perfect. And but there is hope. Hope does live.
Always.
Always. And if people wanted to reach out to you specifically, questions or concerns, or maybe they're dealing with things that they think you could help them with, or your company could, how can people get a hold of you, Ali?
Yeah, so I would say if you're looking for resources, first go to our website, onthejobanoff.com. If you have any questions for me, if it's about the platform or bringing your members on, there's a chat feature on our website. There's a help feature you can email our technical team for anything with that. If you want to email me personally, I'm just Ali, A-L-I, @onthejobanoff.com.
Fantastic. And any last words of wisdom or information you'd like to maybe share with the listeners?
I think I've shared it all. I mean, the only thing is, you hear stories like mine, or you hear a firefighter that's died by suicide or anything like that, and you think, how could this happen? How could we let that happen? But it's allowed to happen by people remaining silent, either not being willing to stand up when something is happening that's not right, or not being willing to, to ask somebody if they're okay, or to share a thing that they overcame. So the biggest thing that I've learned in my life is that I have a voice, and it's important that I use it, and, to use that for good. And every single other person out there has a voice to use for good, to get help, to speak up, to do those things. And so I would just encourage people to keep using their voices where it matters.
And it's policies, and you want to have policies and things like that. It's ink on a paper. It's behavior, actions, and taking corrective actions that really are the important thing.
That's it. Having hard conversations. Yep, got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ali.
Thank
I
you,
do
Tom.
have pages of other notes and things we could talk about, but maybe as I talked to Ali before the show, I think we could definitely do a part 2 down the road
Happy
because there's so much more to talk about with this. The mental health, I don't know if I should call it a crisis, but the mental health awareness, first responder mental health awareness is so important. As suicide situation is so alarming, and we could talk more about that.
I would be happy to talk more about that. Absolutely.
Yeah, so we will definitely agree to find a date where we could do a future show. And but for tonight, I want to wish you a happy holiday season, and I want to thank you again for agreeing to be on the show. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Bye-bye.
All right, we'll talk to you soon, Ellie. Take care. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Oh, Ellie, what a wonderful show. What a wonderful person, a survivor, perseverance like you've never seen before, and just doing so many wonderful, wonderful things now. Please check out her company's website, On the Job and Off. Give her podcast a listen. Check out Capturing the Load. Just fantastic resources. Just fantastic resources. And part of being a professional is understanding and recognizing that the things she talked about are very real, unfortunately, in firehouses. But there is hope that we can make a difference and improve where it needs to be improved, make our people aware. Zero tolerance for the behavior that she experienced, and strong leadership, obviously from senior leaders, but from everybody. Senior members, that's you too. Everyone can be a leader. So thank you for listening in tonight and listening to Ali and her story. I encourage you to check out the book, Where Hope Lives, because there's just so much information in there, that and powerful story as well. Very powerful story. The gift of PTSD. I never heard that before. Holy smokes. Holy smokes. But folks, thank you so much for listening in tonight. Again, if you want to reach out to me, tamerrill63@AOL.com. Again, please, if you haven't give my Facebook page, Professional Volunteer Fire Department, a like, please do so. I'm also on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'd love to hear from y'all. I'd like to talk to you and listen to your ideas and talk about our great fire service. And remember, FDIC, April 20th to the 25th. Start making your reservations now. Hopefully I can see you in my class on Tuesday the 21st, but no matter what class you take, I guarantee you're going to come away fired up and re-energized and ready to roll back in your hometown fire department. I'd like to thank MSA for sponsoring these great podcasts. Fire Engineering, Chief Bobby Halton, thank you so much for allowing us all to do what we love to do and share our messages. We really, really appreciate it. Folks, my next show is going to be early next year. Holy cow, 2020 is fast approaching. No date yet, but again, it'll be pre-recorded as they all will be in 2020. That's great. That's no problem. We will have fantastic guests like Eliana, I guarantee you that. Please be safe as we roll through the month of December. Keep the Worcestershire Six and all the others who died in this terrible, tragedy-filled month in your thoughts, prayers, memories. Please stay safe. And remember, people, that developing, maintaining, upholding a professional reputation is the duty and the responsibility of all firefighters, paid or volunteer. And as I leave you on my last show of 2019, please remember what Ali talked about tonight, and remember that our residents are owed professional service delivered by professional firefighters representing a professional organization. Do everything in your power to be a professional firefighter. Thanks for listening in. Stay safe. God bless. We'll talk to you next month.